actually can say a lot about what's been happening with the financial system. Although I'm not really like a financial expert, but I know that I've been observing the space of like sort of virtual currencies and blockchain and new forms of money that has been sort of emerging over the last like 4 or 5 years. So yeah, obviously blockchain and Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is definitely like a big sort of like thing that occurred like over the last decade. But
Yeah.
it was only recently where people have been starting to realize that we can literally create value out of anything, and we don't need banks or the financial sort of systems to decide like how much is of what value. So yeah, so definitely like virtual currencies and the emergence of that slowly, I feel like it's becoming more of a norm, and I feel like people are developing more interests in it and are realizing it's such a game changer. So my project Seed, Share and Hive will hopefully sort of implement ways of using virtual currency, but in ways that it is sort of creating value out of the value that comes from seed saving for seed share and for other forms of value of or
Yeah.
resources,
Like
whether
natural resources
yeah,
or
like natural resources,
yeah.
maybe food or energy, yeah, or like just sort of social currencies like you know um yeah, like sort of attention and reputation.
Mm.
So definitely I feel like that has been more of a thing lately, as well as the emergence of NFTs, which are non-fungible tokens, which are ways that you can sort of own digital artworks on the blockchain, and you can sort of own that for forever basically until you can sell royalties on that. But I don't necessarily agree with it, but like there are a lot of things that are coming from that space that really mimic current financial value systems, that sort of create that scarcity, and I think that it's this idea of scarcity that really encourages people to hoard and to sort of like steal from others. And so I feel like the virtual currency world is a really big like radical game changer, but it's still showing what we're still doing basically, even without virtual currencies, just creating money out of like thin air and putting value on things that we don't really get value from. We don't really, like countries are still paying for guns, for wars. And I feel like we are sort of at this point now where we can actually create value from planting a tree, or like sort of working with your community to help a land project. So I feel like with the virtual currency space, like there is a technology and the tools now for you to actually like mint a coin or mint a token. Mint means like you're able to sort of create like value out of nothing, and you can place that value on an asset, which is called an asset backed currency. So you can put that on a seed, for example, and that seed will basically carry this much value that you assign it. And this is also called like mutual aid currency or mutual credit. And mutual credit is basically like you and me, let's say, like we sort of trade something and then we create credit for one another with our friends. So literally any sort of community could issue their own credit system that would help sort of create value for this community, and that doesn't have to be relying on businesses to like and not also relying on like the national currency, because we only have just sort of one sort of currency or one sort of value system. We have the pound, the dollar, the yen, we have that one currency that is the main like trading system, between the economy and the individuals, the consumers, people that work for the money. But it seems like now we can have more types of currencies that are not based on the national currency, but they're also based on other forms of credit that can sort of really help shift the landscape of how we define value for things. And that could really change the world, because if you really think about like if we could capture carbon, put a tax on carbon, and then create credits for every time you use renewable energy, and you can use that credit to like maybe pay your taxes, or like buy food. I'm just giving an example.
Yeah, of
And
course.
I feel like then once that happens, people will sort of shift their behavior, and like they will be like encouraged to actually to do good things for the world, because if your money is somehow funding something that is not of value, that is killing the ecosystems, it's extracting and it's degrading the environment, then I feel like you sort of you're sort of incentivized, and it's just going to keep going. So yeah, definitely that's my take on creating regenerative currencies.
Amazing. It sounds like we're going to go through a whole transformation of the meaning of the second house, which is Taurus's house, right? So this is what we put value in. Venus represents monies because that's what we put as highest of value. But if that starts to change, could that then change maybe how we view ourselves and what value we put on ourselves? Okay, so what about like communities and governing themselves, and how is that sort of going to grow and change, and how are we going to move into that, I guess?
I feel like with the sort of crisis that we're going through now with the pandemic and globalization, I feel like globalization is a very big one as well.
Mhm.
We're sort of realizing, as well as being restricted because of lockdown, not
Mm.
being able to go anywhere, being faced with your local environment, we're also starting to like realize our like humanity as like one species, because with the COVID crisis that happened, started in China, it accelerated to all the rest of the world like so quickly, and it just shows you how interconnected we are by the breath.
Mm.
So it just showed me that we have this like global community, but we also have our local environment that we need to protect. And
Mm.
like all we can do is to sort of help create and maintain the local environment, as well as realize that we're all globally connected. And by doing that, by going towards communities, and by sort of being a resilient member of your own like community, whether that might be a local thing or a global thing, just by like doing that, I feel will definitely create that transformation that we need around the world.
Mhm.
We all come from somewhere, and when I think about a global community, I think about how all these local communities are very diverse and very like different and very varied in terms of the genetic varieties of everything.
Mhm.
um, the idea of like connecting communities is also about embracing that diversity, and embracing that we're all different and there is a global like community. We all need that diversity in perspectives, and in and just sort of knowledge, and education, whatever it is, like we all need that diversity so that we can be resilient in a way. Because if you think about monoculture, like monoculture is only focused on breeding like one type of variety, and how is that variety going to do like in terms of trying to be fit, yeah, like fit in the ecology of like the world, because
Mm.
we need to have like trees in order to have oxygen, but we also need lungs and humans in order to breathe out carbon dioxide so that the trees can take in the carbon dioxide. So we need to have each other, and we need to have that diversity, but in being same at the same time in that one ecology.
Mhm. That's amazing. Yeah. And so what do you think about the whole decentralization of like power then? And if communities are sort of doing that, and the control of wealth, and these seed share platforms, but also data and things like that, how is that going to go?
Yeah, so with the governance side, um, there are these things called decentralized autonomous governance, and a lot of the blockchain stuff is basically exploring these ideas. But a lot of these things are already happening at a very local and small scale level, with communities like organizing themselves according to their own like sort of democracy, their own sort of like ways of leadership. So I feel like it's already happening, and people are sort of taking the lead to actually do these things and to be, to self-govern themselves. But yeah, the decentralization world is definitely emerging, especially after we've become super centralized. I think centralization has helped us in a way, because it's helped us survive and come together in like a very close-knit, like agricultural environment. It's helped us survive, create new sort of technologies that help us to, be, in a way, have agency and have independence and autonomy. Because I've got a mobile phone now, and I can, I don't have to go to like, a phone somewhere, a phone booth. I don't have to rely on the government or the public resources to sort of use these tools, so I can use them at my own will now. So I feel like this movement from like centralization of resources, like we needed to go through that, and we needed to sort of rely on one another. I feel like now that we're moving into this phase where we can sort of rely on ourselves and rely on the knowledge that, the knowledge which is like Google and the immediate knowledge that we get on the internet. I feel like we can rely on that as well as have agency in that world. So definitely I feel like we are decentralizing very rapidly, and that is allowing us to sort of join the like communities that we want to join, rather than having to join because we are bounded by like nations or bounded by territories.
Good point. Yeah, really good point. I think we all have this sort of inner moral compass that we haven't exercised as much as we could have, and maybe we are going to develop once we break off into these smaller communities, because it's so much more empowering and it's so much more progressive to be able to self-govern. Once people have responsibility, typically what happens psychologically, we adapt. It's either going to crush us and we get depression, we get down and we find it overwhelming, or we step up to the plate and we take on that responsibility and we become better people actually in our life. The more responsibility we take on, the happier we are typically, the more purposeful our lives become. So again, just I think that we can trust that we can rely on our own moral compass. We don't need to have these rules that have been in place to control many people, nations.
Yeah, we can sort of create our own sort of like nations now in a way through our like communities and values, and that's really exciting. It's very Aquarius, isn't it? Yeah,
Definitely. Oh, that's great. I love that. Okay, so what do you think about the biodiversity then degrading from corporations?
Oh, so the biodiversity of the natural world. Yeah, so yeah, definitely I feel like the whole like profit maximization model of like corporations definitely create that sort of like lack of accountability, and I think that's what it is. It's that corporations don't know that they don't have to be accountable for the waste and the pollution and the massive amounts of like resources being like taken from the ground. And I think that we need to sort of think about ways that we can make these politicians and businesses and corporations accountable for what they're doing. And I think that really relates to what we spoke about with the value and the financial system. Like the financial system is just basically aimed at how we can make more money through interests. And I think that if we created a value system that was about, instead of like extracting resources and making as much money as possible, how can we create like interest out of sort of planting more trees, or make more interest out of like creating more social credits, and like doing things that are good for the world and the ecology of humankind, rather than participating in this model of like constant extraction. And I feel like it's definitely because there lacks the mechanisms that better allow us to sort of realize and account for these things. When I think of accountability, I think of making things like really transparent. Because when I look at corporations today, anyone can sort of hide that they're polluting all these waste into landfills or like oceans. So I feel like finding ways to sort of make things transparent and visible, so people can see that, everything behind like these concrete walls. I think the world would be a lot different, and the world would want a lot of, change immediately, because a lot of people don't really know what they're buying into when they buy things. And I feel like this new world that we're entering with digital currencies, digital platforms, we will sort of find new ways of making these corporations and businesses more accountable for the damage that they're doing. And that could really change business models, that we could, make profit out of creating regenerative farms, make profit out of promoting trust. And I think it's this idea of profit that we need to think beyond. And instead of profit, how can we create a world that thrives, as well as creates value and increases our income, in a sense that it's just mental health.
Yeah, and what you said is like definitely like these documentaries that are coming out on Netflix even now, like Seaspiracy. It's like we are having more transparency, and we're understanding, well, once we understand where things come from and how things are actually operated, I think is this awareness is going to help move us forward massively. Just the pure awareness of things and how sustainable things actually are at the moment, and how things need to change. And I think you're given some great like solutions, what you're working on, and the type of projects and like that your projects come under is so important for this in the future. So I'm so excited that I finally got to talk to you, and we could exchange these ideas. And people can comment what they think about what we've talked about. Any other platforms that anyone else is working on, they can share as well. So thanks so much for talking with me today, Kikki. It's been amazing. And leave a like or comment, and I'll see you guys soon.